Hello, welcome to Football Geeks podcast. My guest tonight is a debut scribe whose new book, 50 Great World Cup Matches and Why You Should Watch Them, is a triumph of format, perfect for both the new initiated and the informed football fan. The 50 games profiled are presented in an enjoyable and easy to read style, allowing the reader to dip in and out of chapters or read the book chronologically. It's accessible, authoritative, and most importantly, it's fun to read. Guys, it gives me great pleasure to welcome author Dominic Hougham. How are you, Dominic? You okay, mate?
I'm great, Phil. Thank you for having me on. That's a lovely lead into the book. And I love that you mentioned that it's accessible to both people who have existing football knowledge and people who are still developing one, because that kind of was the aim of the book, to facilitate both and hopefully introduce people who might not know all of the great games from past World Cups that they didn't experience, to get them interested in it and involved. So thank you for that.
That's great. It really is. That's what we all do, isn't it? When we tend to open a book, we go for the chapters that we like, and then we work our way backwards. And this gives you a great opportunity to do so. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. So congratulations, mate. It's really good, really good work.
But thank you so much. And a friend of mine was saying the same. He said he kind of had it on his coffee table and he just dipped in and out. And I said, that's perfectly, what you should be doing with the book. You don't have to read it chronologically. You don't have to read it in one view. You've got 50 games, just dip in and out and experience them and find out what your favourites are and hopefully learn some new football.
Yeah, so we chatted online before we came on the air, and you're a lapsed West Ham. You used to support West Ham, but now you moved over to California. I mean, I'm looking through, for those who aren't watching on YouTube and listening on Spotify, I'm gazing through Dominic's back window at the moment over a beautiful Californian vista. So how long have you been there, Dom? How long have you been in California, mate?
I moved over in 1997, so it's just over 25 years now. My wife, who I met in London, was from California, so we got married in London, and it was supposed to be a 6-month experiment. And of course, 25 years later, you're still here because who can resist Southern California? I do still support West Ham. I still do watch West Ham. As we were saying beforehand, we actually get excellent coverage over here in the US. We get all of the games on the Premiership shown live every weekend, and also what's beautiful is they tend to be at 7 in the morning or 10 in the morning. So you can actually watch a game, have your breakfast, cup of tea, and then you've got the whole rest of Saturday and Sunday ahead of you to still enjoy. So, I mean, there's a lot of fans over here, and you really do notice, the time that I've been here for 25 years, I've really noticed how much football has taken off, and the Premiership especially has become very, very popular over here. So it's a big deal. The coverage is excellent that they do on NBC. And it's a great way to still be able to experience. But yes, I haven't been back to see West Ham since the 90s, but I still give them my support.
Yeah, well, I was in New York last year, and we went into a bar in New York and watched the Manchester Derby, and there were people from the city who were wearing Manchester City and Man United. The club, the pub was absolutely filled with Premiership League fans. So it's evidently the MSL has had an effect on people's awareness and interest in the game. So that's got to be a good thing. That's got to be a good advert for football, I would imagine. So anyway, let's move on to the book, Dominic. So it's called 50 Great World Cup Matches and Why We Should Watch Them. So what was the genesis of the book? What made you write the book in the first place?
It actually came from an idea. So during COVID, when we had the lockdown, we were watching old games because there was no football on. And I was watching one with my younger son, who was in his late teens at the time. And they had Brazil, Italy, the 1982 match that you could watch on YouTube that had the full game on. So I said to him, let's watch this. It's a fantastic game. You're going to really enjoy it. So we sat and we watched it. And his first comment was, the play looks really slow compared to now. But then we were discussing the game, and I suddenly realized because he said at the end of the game, he goes, yeah, it was entertaining, but he had no context for it. And I just assumed, because if you're our age, you know the Brazil-Italy game, you know the surroundings to it, the lead-in and the consequences. And I just assumed that, of course, someone would know that. And you realize when they don't, that it takes the enjoyment of the game away from them, because he didn't understand about, well, this was a fantastic Brazil team with Zico, etc., and Italian football being a very different style to Brazilian. And that got me thinking about, well, it would be great to have something for people where it gives context. So a lot of the book, yes, I describe the games and try and make it as exciting as possible in the description. But I think more importantly in the book is talking about the context of the game. So for each game, I'll do a lead in of why it was so important. So if you're talking about Denmark, for example, in '96, I'll talk about Danish Dynamite and their, the team that was going into that, and also to give context afterwards of what it means. So if you're talking about Brazil, Italy, Brazil changed the style of football going forward in light of that. So I felt that was the most important part of the book for me, was getting across why these games were so important, so that somebody who then watches, say they watch the highlights or the whole game, which is completely up to them how they want to do it, they have an understanding of why it matters. Why does East Germany versus West Germany matter? Because without that, you're just watching a game, but you only get, say, 25% of the satisfaction. So that's where the idea came from. And then I'd been writing some stuff for Football Times again during the pandemic, and it literally came from there. And I thought, yeah, let's have a go. I started it. I do remember there were times when you think 50 is a great number, but I remember getting to 17 and being like, have I bitten off more than I can chew? You just finished game 17 and you're thinking, I'm still only a third of the way through. But then I would hit it in bursts and you suddenly get over 25. And it was really, really an enjoyable experience to do it. I had no idea what was really involved. And fair play to Pitch Publishing. They were fantastic. They took on board the idea straight away and were very supportive the whole way and guided me through it. So yeah, if anybody hasn't ever done a book and is thinking about it, I would probably recommend it. It's great fun to do. But yeah, that's where the genesis came from, was seeing my son just realizing that he didn't really get an old game because he didn't know the context around it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had an old friend who was an author before because I wrote a book recently, and he said writing a book's like eating a brick. He says it takes time. It's really difficult to get through to the end of it. And I guess that's something that you found to your
Yes,
peril as
definitely.
well.
There were good days and there were bad days. There were days when you have to just force yourself to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to do one game this weekend and I'm just going to do it and get it out of the way. But yeah, it's as you go through the process and your style develops as you go through the process. You find your writing style develops. But it's an amazing achievement when you finished it to think you've actually produced something that is a legacy.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly how I feel about it. I'm sure you feel the same. For me, it's never about the money. It's about having it on the shelf in someone's house, in another
Exactly.
part of the world.
Exactly. I had a photo from somebody who picked it up in Liverpool from Waterstones, and that just makes your day. And they said that their 10-year-old child had basically taken it from them and was reading it back to back. And that is more satisfying. It really isn't about the money. And you're never going to make money anyway publishing football books. It's about just, if you can create more new fans, then as far as I'm concerned, it's done the job that I wanted it to do.
That's great, man. And it's important that you mention context, because obviously the Denmark team of 1978 weren't the same team of 86, and the Italy team of 74 weren't the same as 82, and there were different expectations and different aspirations from everybody over the course of time, wasn't there? So what sparked your interest in the World Cup tournament? I mean, firstly, what was your first one? And we've all felt that World Cup magic, haven't we? We've all been kind of captured by the spell of the World Cup, if you're a serious football fan, of course. But which World Cup was it for you that really kind of floated your boat and made you interested in the competition?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was one of those children that absolutely loved playing football. I was a classic 70s latchkey kid. We played in the playground, we played at the park until it was dark, all of that. But what you need to remember from that era, that you'll know, is there wasn't a lot of football on TV. I mean, if you wanted to actually watch it, there was kind of sports night and match of the day, but they were on late, so you weren't always allowed by your parents to watch it. So you're kind of restricted to the big match highlights and football focus on a Saturday morning. So when a World Cup came around, it was a huge event because you suddenly had all of this live football you could gorge on. And I remember, just for me, I kind of have a really distant memory of 74. I don't know how much I truly remember and how much I've confused it with highlights I've watched since, but I have a kind of hazy memory. But for me, the first big one was 78. I remember getting the wall chart, as everybody would do then. You'd stick up the wall chart so you could fill it in as it went along. I remember getting the Panini sticker book, swapping with friends. And it felt so glamorous because you were used to just English football, and suddenly you've got your sticker book. There's Zaire in there, there's Haiti in there. You're trying to find where these countries are at that age. You don't even know about them. And I think what a lot of people forget now with the World Cup is you didn't really know any of the players at that time. Like, even if you think about somebody like Johan Cruyff, who's so famous, at that time you may have seen highlights of him on Sports Night, and again, highlights playing in the European Cup, but that was about it. So you get to the World Cup and you'd have your sticker book, and you didn't know who Zico was, or you didn't know who Socrates was. You didn't see them week to week. Or now everybody knows everybody in the World Cup. So it had that glamour to it. It was international. Also, when you're a kid, the fantastic thing is it was during the summer holidays. So you could literally sit there and just gorge the football and watch every single game, which I did. So 78 is the first one I really remember. I mainly remember the hype around Scotland because England weren't there. So there was all the hype around Scotland and their shenanigans that went on. And the ticker tape and Kempes is a very big memory. The ticker tape was especially glamorous. My mother grew up in Brazil, so she was very passionate about Brazil games. So I do remember the Argentina-Peru match very well, and I remember her being in a completely bad mood for 2 days afterwards and throwing accusations around the whole time. But yeah, that was 78, and it's funny because obviously I was an England fan at the time, and the 70s were the worst time to be an England fan because 74 they didn't qualify, 78 they didn't qualify. So I didn't actually see them in a World Cup until 1982, which was a great one because I just finished my O levels and so again could literally just sit down and watch everything. And of course, Robson scores after 20 seconds against France. I'm like, oh, England in a World Cup, this is great, and it all went downhill from then on for the rest of my life. So yeah, 78 would be the first one. And as I say, it's that thing of being a child. You have the time to watch it. You can get really involved. It's not like you have a lot of other distractions in your life at that age. So yeah, that was the one that did it for me. And then 82 and 86 are two that I also really, really love.
Yeah, there's an exoticism about the World Cup, wasn't there? I always say my first World Cup was the 78 World Cup, same as yours, Dominic. And I always say that my first two true loves were Robbie Rensenbrink and Debbie Harry. Yeah, football and music, that's the two things I love. And that was it for me. So they were my people when I was an 8-year-old. I was just
and you've got to realize, like, you see that. You saw the Argentinian stadiums with the ticker tape. We'd never seen anything like that. It was incredible.
It was very different to the Cop at St Andrews. Very, very different. With the cascading urinals at the back. It just wasn't the same thing at all. But there's still that magic to the World Cup. I think obviously because it's so polarized and so there's so much coverage of it. There's not the surprises that there used to be, and I think that was part of the allure, wasn't it? The element of surprise.
Yeah, you're definitely right there. There's the players that were, because again, you didn't really know about the players and you didn't know too much about the teams. You had a brief introduction. You knew Holland were good, but until you actually sat down, say in the 74 World Cup and watched Holland, and now I get the hype. Now I understand. Because as you say, there was so little football on TV, especially live football, that this was your chance to catch up on everybody. And they were. You didn't know all of the teams, as you say. Argentina, I didn't know who Kempes was when the World Cup started, and I definitely did by the end of it.
Yeah. So, stay. Obviously, we're going to stay on the World Cup theme throughout the interview because that's what it's about. But prior to us going on air, I asked you to pick five of your favourite World Cup games as featured in the book. So, one you've touched on briefly before. So, should we start with that one from the '82 World Cup, Dom?
Yes, I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody when you're picking five that Brazil, Italy is in there. Just as an aside, what I did for the book, because it's quite interesting because I get asked this a lot. People said, did you think about ranking them? Because I don't actually rank the 50 games. And I said that was a very deliberate choice not to rank them because everybody will have a different opinion anyway. It's all subjective. I could give you a ranking of 50, you would give a completely different ranking, everybody would. And who am I to say that one game is better than the other? And I don't even think I could rank them. I would have difficulty separating them. But there are certain ones that are deemed classics, and I mark those in the book. I think there's 22 out of 50 that I say are classics. There are ones like Italy, Brazil, where most people would agree that that was probably at least in the top 10. That would be my first one. As I say, probably almost everybody would choose that one. It's such a famous game. And I've just actually finished reading, there's an excellent book called The Match by Piero Trelawney, which is 500 pages just on this game alone. That's kind of how famous this game is. I'm doing 5 pages on it. Someone's doing 500 pages on it. For me, it was a magical game. I mean, you think about it, you had the two differing styles. So you have Italy, who always kind of renowned for being defensive. It's slightly stereotypical, but people throw the word catenaccio around. And then you have Brazil, who obviously Joga Bonito. They're known for their attacking flair and their exciting football. So you had this clash of styles, and as they say in boxing, styles make fights. And you had this great clash of these two different styles playing in the World Cup. And Brazil had such a great generation of players. You had Zico, you had Socrates, you had Eder. And again, we didn't know too much about them, but they had done that European tour just before the World Cup. So in 1981, they played England, France, and West Germany in the space of a few days and beat them all. It was the first England game I ever went to. It was England, Brazil, and Zico scored, and they won 1-0. So we kind of were getting an inkling that this was a fantastic team. And then they go into the World Cup and they are just playing beautifully. They have the scare against the Soviets, but then they score 2 great goals towards the end to win that. Scotland have the audacity to take the lead against them, and then they get hammered 4-1. And then they can cruise their last game against New Zealand, but cruising is still winning 4-0. So they were just on fire. And then Italy were being typical Italy, having one of their slow starts to the World Cup. They drew all of their 3 group games. They only got through because they scored 1 more goal than Cameroon to even get past there. Bearzot had put his faith in Paolo Rossi. Paolo Rossi wasn't performing. Everything was sort of going wrong. The Italian press were all over them. And then they both got put into the second round with Argentina. So it's a really tough group. And what happened was they both beat Argentina, but Brazil beat them by 1 more goal. So they went into the final game. It was effectively a winner takes all. A draw would actually allow Brazil to get through. So Brazil only needed to draw or win. Italy had to win to get to the semi-finals. And it was played at the Stadio Sario in Barcelona, which was a really small, compact stadium. So I think it was holds 44,000. So there was a great atmosphere on the day. I can remember it was just absolutely full of yellow and blue, and both teams were playing in their classic kits, and it was sunny. And you had Socrates there, Falco, Zico for Brazil. So it was all set up for a great match. And then what made it perfect was Italy scored early on. So I think after 5 minutes, Paolo Rossi scores, which then means that Brazil have to play. I mean, they would anyway, but they would really have to play. So he puts them in an early lead, and then you get a beautiful goal from Brazil. So Socrates passes it into Zico. Zico does this beautiful move, a little back heel spin, gets it back to Socrates, who kind of blasts it in at the near post. So you got 1-1. Then still early on, you have Cerezo for Brazil does this crazy square ball across the middle of the park without really looking. And Paolo Rossi, who again had been asleep until this game, just comes in, grabs the ball quick as a whippet, and smacks it past the keeper. So Italy retake the lead 2-1. And that's how it goes until half time. And it's a great back and forth battle. And then kind of 68 minutes, Brazil equalise again. So it's a fantastic goal from Falcao. He cuts inside. I think Cerezo makes a run on the outside to pull the Italian defence. He comes on the inside, smacks it with his left foot. And you're thinking, that's it. Brazil have got it. They've got it back to 2-2. There's 20 minutes to go. All they need to do is shut up shop. But yeah, it's Brazil. Brazil don't really know shut up shop, especially this team. So they carry on attacking. And then with 15 minutes to go, Italy get a corner. It comes in. It's kind of scrambled around. And suddenly Paolo Rossi sticks a toe out and he's got his hat trick. And he's wheeling away in celebration. And I can remember, as I say, with my mother being from Brazil, the shock when he realised that he had 15 minutes left for Brazil to save their World Cup. So they throw everything at the Italians. Socrates does score, but it was offside. And then, to be fair, Antonioni scores for Italy on what actually looks like a fairly fair goal when you really look at it. But he was given offside as well. And then you had this crazy moment in the last minute when the ball comes across and Oscar from Brazil heads it. And it's going in and Zoff just dives down and he literally stops it on the line. And he's holding the ball on the line. The Brazilians are feeling that it's crossed, but yeah, they're not going to give that. And then suddenly the whistle goes and you're like, wow, this fantastic Brazil team that had been so hyped up and had been playing such beautiful football were out just like that. And to this day, probably more, I think, has been written about this game than any other World Cup game. And it's always slightly unfair because when you do, there's a lot of people who feel, the Italians, you're the bad guys, you beat the beautiful Brazil team. And it's unfair to Italy. They were actually played fantastically on the day. Paolo Rossi was on fire, gets a hat-trick. They go on to win the World Cup. I mean, fair play to Italy. They just played really well on the day and deserved their victory. Brazil, obviously, among football fans since then, they've always been seen now as one of those beautiful teams that actually, one of the great teams that didn't win the World Cup. So if you think about Hungary in 54 or Netherlands in 74, we were talking about Denmark in 86. They're one of those teams that becomes beloved over time, but for actually not winning the World Cup. But it was just one of those perfect games where it was sunny, the atmosphere was fantastic, it was bright colours, Brazil were in their yellow, Italy were in their blue, it was back and forth, Italy scored, Brazil scored, Italy scored, Brazil scored, Italy scored. Just a beautiful game. I mean, I don't know what else to say on that. I mean, it's one of those, as I say, it was the first one I watched with my son when I wanted to introduce him to old classic games, because I said, this is probably one of the greatest games you'll ever see.
Yeah, there's a lot of affection thrown at that Brazil team, and as you say, the Italian team weren't really given the credit they probably deserved. I've got an Italian. I got an Italian uncle, and we watched the final at his house. He was a restaurateur in Birmingham, and he had all his Italian friends around, and it was absolutely incredible. The final. Maybe I'm giving things away here for those who aren't initiated in the World Cup, but I won it. Yeah, they won it. but he always said, my uncle always said that the 1978 team were better than the 82 team.
Right.
And they started like a train in 78 and were narrowly edged out by 2 long-range goals against Holland in the second group stage in a game that they were winning and what would have taken them through to the final. So it's strange, and it's strange how differing opinions kind of fuel our excitement of the game.
And you have to remember the Italian press were just hammering the team before this game. And the Italian press are pretty hard. And fair play to Berzot. Everyone was saying, why are you playing Rossi? I mean, he only just come back from the ban because he got banned for the betting scandal. So he looked out of shape. And but he stuck with him. Berzot stuck with him, and he delivered. And as you know, he then carried on delivering for the rest of the World Cup. So that was a very brave move as a manager to do that, and it paid off. But yeah, that Brazil team was just a thing of beauty. It was so sad to see that happen, but Italy deserved it on the day.
No, they did, and staying with the 1982 World Cup, because that spawned the second game that you're going to talk to us about, which was the semi-final stage, wasn't it? I'll let you
Yes.
take over. I won't give too much away if you'd like to elaborate, Dominic.
Yeah, this one I really do remember watching. It's France versus West Germany was the semi-final, and it's the game that I feel took away my innocent view of football as a child. It was the first game where I think at the end I was actually angry and felt that justice hadn't been served. And as a young kid, just I'm like, what? You mean the good guys don't win every time? So it was a real awakening. It was one of those games that just had everything. I mean, if you're thinking about a movie, you really want a good villain in a movie. This had a villain. This had lead changes, goals, penalties, all the drama in it. So the background of it, as you know, is that France hadn't had a great World Cup up to then, but they were warming up. So they lost to England in that first game, but they did get through the group stage. And then luckily, because Northern Ireland had beaten Spain, they got into a group of Northern Ireland and Austria. So they progressed all the way to the semi-final, and they were kind of getting better as it went along. The Germans had already set their stall. So the classic thing that happened with them was they lost to Algeria 2-1 in their opening game. It was the first time a European team had ever, African team had ever actually beaten a European team in the World Cup. It was a huge shock at the time. I mean, you've got to remember that Germany had just won the 80 European Championships. It was a very, very strong team. But when you got to the last group game, it was at a time when FIFA still decided to play them at different times. So you didn't play them simultaneously like you do now. Algeria played first, and they actually won their game, but it meant that Germany and Austria knew what they needed to get through. And what it meant was if Germany won by 1 or 2 goals, both themselves and Austria progressed to the next round. Now you're talking about 2 countries that are neighbors and speak the same language. And no surprise, what happened was Germany scored after 10 minutes, and then the game just died. They basically refused to play. They didn't even make an effort to make it look as if it was realistic. They just really passed it around. It got known as the disgrace of Hougham. They got a lot of abuse for it. The West German commentators even refused to continue commentating. The Austrian commentators were asking viewers to turn off. My favorite is the Spanish. The Spanish put the match report in their crime section of a newspaper. And there was a lot of bad press about this game. And it was so unfair because everybody, of course, was feeling sorry for Algeria, these little underdogs who had beaten Germany and now were kicked out of the World Cup because of this stage result. And it's the one that persuaded FIFA then to go with simultaneous last games, quite rightly. So West Germany had already kind of soured their reputation a little bit by that. They then go in the next group where they face England and Spain, and they eliminate them. So you've got a World Cup in Spain where you've just eliminated the host nation. You've had a disgraceful game against Austria. So it had that kind of feel of almost the evil empire against the resistance, with the French-winning resistance, even before you kicked off. So you had the drama of that. And then you just had this fantastic game where Germany, after about 17 minutes, they take the lead. Litbarski scores. And then the French come straight back. So they win a penalty. And obviously, if you want anybody to be taking a penalty, it's Michel Platini at that time. He was just a dead ball expert. So he steps up and equalises. So even before half an hour, you've already got 2 goals. It's a 1-1 game. And then you have a moment before half time where the French had a goalkeeper called Schumacher. And he gets a ball and Amos comes into him, and Schumacher kind of throws a shoulder at him and then runs off. And the French fans start jeering. It's kind of a strange thing to do, but Schumacher does this and starts antagonizing the crowd. So the French crowd is kind of against him at that stage. So you go to the second half, and the substitution comes. So with Hidalgo, who's the French manager, brings on Battiston, and this is where the big drama happens. So after about an hour, you get Platini gets the ball, and he hits this beautiful pass through for Battiston. He's clean through. The ball's going to fall kind of between him and Schumacher. So Schumacher's racing out. They're both racing towards the ball, and Battiston gets there first. And as I say in the book, he pokes the ball past, only to see his attempt go narrowly wide, except he doesn't see it. Because what happens, as we all remember, is Schumacher just throws himself at Battiston, turns his body, and his hip hits Battiston full on. So the camera's following the ball, and you see the ball, and it goes narrowly wide. And then they go back, and Battiston is just out. I mean, he is poleaxed on the ground. It's one of those really, really scary moments. He's just not moving. So the French players rush around him. They call a stretcher as fast as possible. You can see there's something really serious up. They pop him on a stretcher. He's being carried off. Platini's holding his hand. The French players just look distraught. And Schumacher decides to just lean against the post nonchalantly and watch all of this. And you're thinking, okay, it's going to be a red card. There's going to be a free kick to France. No, the referee gives a goal kick. No, nothing at all for Schumacher, who, as I say, is just waiting to take the goal kick. And it's just, from then on, the Germans are then the enemy. They've got to the game, with the Algeria farce, and now they just knocked out. Schumacher has just knocked out one of their players. It would be when they got to the end of it and they looked at his injuries, it was pretty horrendous actually. I think he had missing teeth, he had broken vertebrae. I mean, it was a horrendous challenge. So anyway, so they have to then carry on the game after that, and it goes into extra time, and suddenly the French just are on fire. So 2 minutes into extra time, they score from Trésor. He's unmarked in the middle from the free kick, and he volleys it past Schumacher. And then they throw on Rummenigge for Germany to attack. But then the French score again. So it was Duress gets the ball on the edge of the area and absolutely drills it past Schumacher. And so suddenly, within 8 minutes, France are 3-1 up in the first period of extra time. You think, this is it. French have done it. This is fantastic. This is justice for what's happened earlier in the game. But it's Germany, and you forget Germany are Germany, and they're famous for never giving up and making comebacks. So Rummenigge scores just before the break of extra time, so suddenly they're only 1 goal down. And then they come back in the second part of the period, and Klaus Fischer scores with a fantastic overhead kick. And that was a kind of Klaus Fischer special. He was known for these overhead kicks, so he equalizes. And they go to penalties. The first time actually penalties was ever used in a World Cup game. And of course, it goes all the way to kind of the 5th penalty. And to write the script, Schumacher saves a penalty. Had to happen, didn't it? The villain has just made himself the hero by saving a penalty. The Germans score their last one, and they're through. They win 5-4 on penalties after a 3-3 game to go on to the World Cup final. And as I say, the whole discussion afterwards is really about Schumacher and his kind of almost assault on Battiston. Two, as I say, losing 2 teeth, 3 broken ribs, back damage. And yeah, so they go on to the final, and it's the one time when I think everybody was rooting for Italy to beat them. And Italy do, they win 3-1. Tardelli does his famous celebration where he's racing across the field, his eyes bulging. But it's just one of those games that just had literally everything from start to finish. It's a great game anyway. I mean, it's 3-3 and then penalties, so that's enough drama. But with the whole Schumacher incident thrown in there, yeah, as I say, you had heroes, you had Platini, you had villains with Schumacher, you had 2 very good teams playing slightly different styles. Yeah, it's just everything you would want from a football match in terms of drama.
Yeah, no, and nothing cast Germany. Germany were like the Death Star in Star Wars, weren't they? They were, and they were in the white stormtrooper kit as well, which kind of seems apt in context. But
Yeah.
4 years later, there was another enemy that came to the fore, a small guy called Diego Maradona, who in a game against England in the quarterfinal. He scored two. It was a good game. It wasn't really a good game. It was a game that was defined by moments, wasn't it?
Yes.
And there was some great football, great individual shows of football, but overall it was a disappointing game. But the game that we're going to talk about has the same protagonists involved, but that took place much later in 1998 at the France World Cup. So we know the protagonists, Dominic. So do you want to tell us a story about that one?
Yeah. So I had to kind of have an England game, I think, as one of the five. And it could have been, as you say, it could have picked Argentina versus England in '86 because that is a classic game. But to be fair, it is a game of moments. When you actually rewatch the game, a lot of it's fairly dull. You just have that 5 minutes when Maradona sets the world alight with first a handball and then his fantastic individual run. And then at the end, Lineker scoring and then almost scoring. But apart from that, it's actually not the greatest game. I could have picked England versus West Germany in '90. But again, that's just a very emotional game. I'm not sure most people call it a classic. It's just, it was high emotion, especially if you were English at that time and Gascoigne and everything. But I felt the game between Argentina and England in '98 was the one that kind of had everything. It was a fantastic one. So that was the one where Michael Owen announced himself to the world. So you go into the World Cup, it was in the round of 16, and Argentina had won their group, and it was thought that England would win their group, so they wouldn't have played each other. But what happened was England actually came second because they lost to Romania. So you get this round of 16 game in San Etienne. And going into the World Cup, England had the partnership of Shearer and Sheringham. But towards the end of the group stage, they'd thrown Owen on for one of the matches, and he scored and announced himself to the world. So he ended up being picked for the Argentina game. And this is an Argentina that has Varane, Ortega, Batistuta. I mean, it's a really, really good team. And Diego Simone, who we'll get to in the game. So they kick off, and it just, right from the start, I remember this game, it goes off at 100 miles an hour. I mean, there's no settling into it. Literally, Argentina, after it's 5 minutes old, Argentina get a penalty. So Simone breaks in, he gets brought down by Seaman. Brought down by Seaman, and Batistuta converts the penalty. Batigol was extremely reliable and things like that. So you've got a game that's already 1-0 to Argentina early on, and then just 4 minutes later, Owen gets into the area. He's got frightening speed. He gets brought down or gets blocked, and the referee calls it as a penalty. So Shearer levels it up. So you've got a game that's 9 minutes old, and it's already 1-1, and the pace is just fantastic. And then you get the moment that every England fan remembers, and it was after 16 minutes, and Beckham picks up the ball in the midfield, and he launches it forward towards Owen. Owen picks it up. He's only just ahead of a centre circle. He kind of flicks on, and he just puts the jets on, and he fires ahead. He beats off Shamo, who's trying to tackle him. He gets Roberto Ayala comes to challenge him, and Owen just literally sprints around the side of him. He's breaking to the side, and it just slams the ball from distance into the top corner. It's an absolute beauty. And this is, a kid who, yes, he just had a good premiership, but he was still a teenager at the time. And it just launches him onto the stage. So you've got this moment of pure genius, which is kind of like similar to '86 with Maradona's goal. I'm not saying it's as good as, but one of the great goals. So England are then 2-1 up, and you think they're going to be okay towards half time, and then Argentina get a free kick, and they do a really clever kind of training ground routine where Varane fakes to shoot, but then actually passes it to Zanetti, and he spins and hits it past Seaman. So you go into half time, and you've already got a game that's 2-2 and had a classic goal, so kind of similar to '86 in that way. And then you get the controversy. So they come out for the second half, and it's only 2 minutes in, and Simone kind of goes into the back of Beckham. Beckham goes down, and while they're lying there, And Simone kind of pins him to the ground, and it's a bit of a dirty move, but nothing foul. But Beckham reacts, and Beckham kicks out and catches Simone's calf, and Simone goes down, and the referee gives a red straight away. And suddenly you've got this moment where England are down to 10 men, facing at least another 35 minutes just to get to extra time. So England have to obviously become much more defensive after that, but they do this fantastic rearguard action against a very good Argentina team, and they almost steal it. There's a moment with about 10 minutes to go where there's a corner and Sol Campbell scores, and he gets disallowed apparently for a Shearer push. I rewatched it, and to me, it's still, not being biased, it does not look a foul. So there's that, and then so they get all the way to extra time with 10 men. They're pretty exhausted, but they get through that as well. So there's also a moment in extra time where England again had a really good penalty shout. There was an incident where Shamo handballs it above Alan Shearer, and it looks to extent like it should be a penalty, but it wasn't given. But they make it to penalties, and it's pretty amazing that they do. They're absolutely shattered. The penalties, the shootout goes all the way to 4-4, and then Ayala scores his, so you've left with David Batty coming up to shoot, and as long as he scores, then it goes into sudden death. But sadly, Batty hits it, the keeper saves it. It actually turns out later that was the first penalty David Batty had ever taken. But the cojones to step up and have this attempt. So so England, it's the old penalty knockout again. They lose 4-3, but it's always seen as such a great rearguard action. I mean, they were really backs against the wall. It was fantastic stuff. It was a great England team with really good potential. Owen was just on fire. I mean, he was scaring Argentinian team every time he got the ball. He had that lightning pace at that time. And then you get the kind of sad reaction afterwards. The press just decide to vilify Beckham for the red card, and he gets all the blame for their exit. And there's that famous Daily Mirror headline where they say 10 heroic lions, one stupid boy. There's dartboards printed by newspapers with his face on it. There's death threats. It gets really out of hand. And early on in that Premiership campaign, there were incidents of effigies being held up, etc. And but he gets the ultimate last laugh, at least, because it's 98-99, and it's the season when Manchester United do the double, where they actually the treble, where they get the Champions League, the league, and the FA Cup. And of course, he redeems himself later. There's the last-minute goal against Greece. And what's actually really nice is he's also part of a team that then beats Argentina in 2002 when he scores from the penalty spot. But it's just, it was a fantastic game because it was 100 miles an hour all the way. Two teams, great form. Owen just in the form of his life, announcing himself to the world. We knew a bit about him in England, but this was the one that launched him into a global superstar. And that goal, you can watch it 100 times, and it's still a thing of beauty. So that's why I would pick that one as one of the great games.
It was really high in the pantheon of England all-time disappointments, that one, because as you say, they were possibly England's best tournament team. I would venture. Great players, and they were on a roll of form. They looked as if they could go all the way, and then they were deprived by this kind of poor luck and bad refereeing decisions, and that's the way that it goes sometimes, but that's the way it always seems to go for England. So we'll move on 20 years. We're going to go into the new heavyweight territory of world football and how it seems to be shaping up at the moment, because there's the next two games you're going to talk about feature the same protagonists, and would you consider them to be the world heavyweights of football now, these two sides?
Yeah, it's you're talking about Argentina and France, which has become a great rivalry, and both the last two games that I picked actually involved both of them. First of all, the first one I went with was the 2018 game because it was such a fantastic game. It's the one that no spoilers, but France win 4-3. But what's really famous on that game is the arrival of Mbappe. So again, kind of like Owen, Mbappe was a teenager at the time. The two global superstars were obviously Messi and Ronaldo. And there was all the story in the 2018 World Cup. It was all about Messi, and same as it is in the next World Cup, all about his legacy and the fact that at that time he hadn't delivered a trophy for Argentina. He'd been fantastic with Barcelona, but he hadn't done it with Argentina. They'd lost in Copa America finals. They obviously lost in the World Cup final against Germany. So there was that kind of feeling that he needed a World Cup to cement his place among the greats and to kind of be like the next Maradona. So they end up playing in this round of 16 against France. And it's just this incredible game from the start. So just trying to remember how it goes. So Mbappe is playing. He becomes France's youngest player at a World Cup. He's only 19 years old at this time. So he scores in the groups, become their youngest ever scorer at a World Cup. He's, as I say, 19 and a half, and he bangs in a goal. So you get this game, and it's the first time you really see Mbappe on form. So kicking off early, Griezmann. I need a 2-minute pause. Sorry, can I take a 2-minute pause?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just need to get my head to go. Sorry, I need to remember this one. Okay. Sorry. I'll carry on. So the game starts off. Griezmann gets very close early on, and then you get this fantastic moment when Mbappe announces himself to the world. So he picks up the ball fairly near his own area, and he just sprints across the pitch. And he's absolutely flying. He just literally goes in a straight line, and he goes all the way through. He gets all the way to the penalty area. Rojo comes across, and the only way he can stop him is to foul him. I mean, he just burns past him. And so it's a penalty to France, and Griezmann scores and gives them the lead. But it's the first time the world has really seen the scary pace that Mbappe has. So then Argentina come back into the game, and just before halftime, they equalise through Di Maria. So just at the right time to get an equaliser as you go in at halftime, perfect time. Then Argentina actually take the lead early on in the second half. So it's Messi scores. He's kind of deflected in, but he scores at the far post. So Argentina are 2-1 up, and they're trying now to really stop Mbappe. So Mbappe is scaring them with speed, but they're kind of double marking him the whole time. But then you get this beautiful goal backed by the French, where Lucas Hernandez goes down the edge and he crosses it, and Pavard comes in and just absolutely rifles the first-time shot into the goal. It's one of the. It actually is voted the goal of the tournament at the end, and it's one of the all-time great goals. So suddenly it's 2-2, and then Mbappe strikes again. So he gets the ball, he turns the defender, and he puts them into the lead for the third time. So you've now had it go, the lead change 3 times. He's now scored his goal. Then Mbappe scores again with 11 minutes to go. So he gets the ball from Giroud and just fires it past in. So suddenly it's 4-2 to France. And Mbappe has now got 2 goals. And then right near the end, Messi passes it across to Aguero at the back post, and he heads it in. So it's 4-3, and Argentina throw everything at France at the end, but they hold on. So you get this fantastic game that's 4-3 to France. Mbappe scored 2 goals literally in the space of 5 minutes, and just being on terrifying form the whole time. With his speed, Pavard scored the goal of the tournament. It's literally changed position throughout. France ahead, Argentina ahead, France ahead, and suddenly you have this new global superstar in Mbappe, and that's who everyone's talking about. And obviously, the story afterwards is that Messi yet again suffers disappointment. He doesn't get the World Cup that he wanted, but you have a new star, and suddenly instead of just being Ronaldo and Messi, you have Mbappe. So yeah, it was an incredible game. As I say, it was just just, that run by Mbappe is the iconic moment, because you see the confidence of youth, what speed can do. I mean, he had no intention of passing it on that run. He knew that he could beat everybody, and it took, yeah, they had to foul him and give away a penalty even to even stop him. So, yeah, an amazing game. That, as I say, a 4-3 classic, and it's time that the world met Mbappe.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, Kylian Mbappe almost came back 4 years later to haunt them again, which you'll go into more detail in a moment. But then, obviously, we had the anomaly that was the Qatar World Cup. It was a World Cup that threatened to not be loved by the fans for good reason. I would say, in my opinion. However, as the tournament grew, there was no doubting the quality of the football. It was football-wise, it was a decent tournament, wasn't it? And obviously, it was premiered at the end by what was an incredible showpiece final, which I think you're going to tell us about now, aren't you, Dan?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick overview. I mean, as you say, it was a tournament where I was almost not wanting to like it going in because of the whole issue of it being played in winter and Qatar and the various issues around it. But it delivered, and there were some great moments. I mean, I was torn between what to pick, actually. There was the whole Japan, Spain, Germany, Costa Rica group game that was just absolutely fantastic, which was great because it just reminded everybody, especially the World Cup people, about how great group games can be and why you should have a 4-team group with 2 going through. There was the Argentina-Netherlands quarterfinal, which was just full of needle, one of those games where just red cards and drama and late equalizers. But the reason I love the World Cup final on this one is because the final is often very disappointing. It's a game that is so cagey normally because there's so much at stake that you don't normally get a classic game. They're fairly rare. But this one was. This was a totally fantastic game. What happens is Messi, again, it's this whole conversation beforehand is about Messi and his legacy. And surely this time now he's 37 years old. This is a time he's going to have to deliver. And now he has another chance. He got Messi and Mbappe both playing. They're probably the best 2 players in the world at that stage. So Messi scores first. He gives Argentina the lead in the first half. And then as halftime is approaching, Argentina score again. Di Maria scores. So they're 2-0 up at halftime, and they're cruising. They look fantastic through the first 45 minutes. And to be fair, you just think, well, this is only going one way. Argentina are going to win this. But then with 10 minutes to go, the whole game suddenly changes. So first of all, Mbappe scores from a penalty kick. So Muani goes down, they get a penalty, and Mbappe coolly converts that. So you're thinking, oh, well, game on with 10 minutes to go. And suddenly France are a completely different team than they've been for the previous 80 minutes. And then Mbappe does this beautiful kind of 1-2 with Thuram. He sprints into the area, hits a volley straight into the corner 90 seconds after having scored his penalty. And you're suddenly, oh my God, it's 2-2. This could go either way. And then it's just this completely frantic end to the game. Both sides are hammering at each other. There's 8 minutes of stoppage time. But it ends up going to 2-2 and into extra time. And you get this kind of a pause early on in extra time. They're both catching their breath. But then as you go into the second period, the whole game comes to life again. So Messi scores with a goal where they weren't even sure if it crossed the line at first. There was some controversy, but the referee gave it. So that gives them the lead at 3-2. You then got 5 minutes to go and you're thinking they're going to do it. And then Mbappe earns a penalty and he equalizes. So you then have to 3-3, and you've got this classic Messi versus Mbappe now. And Mbappe scored 3 goals, Messi scored 2 goals. And then right at the end, you get Kolo Muani gets clean through, and he has this moment against Martinez where it feels like time has stopped. You're there. Is he going to score? You think he is, and Martinez just does this fantastic save right at the death. And then the ball goes to Argentina. They go up the field, cross it. Martinez has a header. He almost scores. And it's like two boxers against, literally at the end of a 12-round fight, just slugging away at each other, exhausted. But in the end, it goes to penalties, and Argentina win it on penalties. They win 4-2, and Messi gets his moment. He finally gets his World Cup win. He also becomes the first player to score in the group stage. He scores in the round of 16, quarterfinal, semi-final, and the final. And it's his moment of legacy. So it's a great duel between two fantastic teams. You've got both Messi and Mbappe on form, both of them scoring in the final. But Messi gets his moment, and it's one of those finals that will live on forever. I mean, the excitement at the end, especially, it really was like just two boxers slugging away. It had everything you want in a World Cup final, which they normally don't.
Yeah, I think what it did, it kind of re-established a kind of a faith in the World Cup again after, as you say, there's so many kind of moribund games where teams don't go at each other, and then you've got two of the greatest teams in the world who are willing to take that chance, and it always poses the question for me: why don't you start a game like that?
Yeah,
Why don't
exactly.
you, as a nation, go into a game and try and get 1 goal ahead, 2 goal ahead, rather than wait and then find yourself 1-0 behind? This was a real ding dong slugfest, and what a game! Possibly the greatest World Cup final, arguably the greatest World Cup final of all time. I'm sure there would be people who would disagree with me on that.
Some Brazilians in 1970 might disagree, but
yeah,
I mean, in terms of excitement and just drama, definitely.
Yeah, and football is a game of opinions, isn't it? So we're all entitled to them. But and moving on to the idea of opinions, what would you say was your favourite World Cup, Dominic? You've seen a few now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So when I wrote the book and I was looking at the classics, I then added them up at the end to see which World Cup had the most classics in my view, and it was 1986, and that was for me actually one of the perfect World Cups because I was at college, at university. So I was watching it in a big group of people every game, and I was able to watch them all because it was after my exams. But yeah, when I look back to that, there was kind of 4 games that really spring to mind. The first one is just Denmark in that World Cup. They were absolutely fantastic. So in the group stage, for those that don't know, it was Danish. They would call it Danish Dynamite, that generation of players. And they qualified for the World Cup by beating the Soviet Union 4-2, what's described as one of the greatest qualifying games ever. And they just had this golden generation. They had Arneson, Lerby, Michael Laudrup, they had Elkjær, Jesper Olsen. So they were kind of the hipsters' favourite going into the World Cup. But then you don't know what they're going to be like. And then they have this group game against Uruguay. Now, to be fair, Uruguay go down to 10 men after 19 minutes, but still, Denmark just play the most outrageous football. Elkjær scores a hat trick. Laudrup scores one of the goals of the tournament, and they end up winning 6-1. And that's when everybody was suddenly aware of Denmark. If you weren't aware of Denmark before, you were at that point. And they went on to win all 3 of their group games. And then they go on to play Spain in the round of 16. And so you're really hyped up to watch them, like thinking, isn't it fantastic? And they take the lead. And then there's this famous moment when Jesper Olsen gets the ball from the keeper and he decides to do a no-look pass across the area back to the keeper. And he doesn't realise that Butragueño is there for Spain. Butragueño comes in, equalises just for half time. And then everything Spain touch turns into a goal. So Denmark is still doing their attacking football, but Spain are just clinical, and Butragueño especially is a fantastic player anyway. So he ends up scoring 4 goals. Spain beat Denmark 5-1, an absolutely fantastic game. And it's funny because that Denmark team, yes, they go on, and a later team goes on to win the Euros in the 92, but this is probably the team that is most beloved still in that country. It's kind of like the Brazil of 82. They're one of the great teams not to win the World Cup. So you had that whole story was fantastic. Then you obviously had the Brazil-France. There was a great quarterfinal between those two, both having come off their 82 disappointment. That went all the way to penalties. Platini scores, and it has a moment in extra time where again a French player who's clean through Bologna and he gets knocked over by or nudged by the Brazilian keeper. And it's kind of like that 82 game again. There's no red card, there's no penalty. And you think, oh my God, is the same thing going to happen to France yet again? But what happens is they actually win on the penalties. So they go through. But that's a great game. And then you also have the Argentina-England game that we were talking about earlier. So, yes, it wasn't a classic, but those 5 minutes of Maradona, everybody knows him. Even if you're not a huge football fan, you know about the hand of God. And I remember feeling the injustice of the time. But then again, 4 minutes later, he scores probably the greatest goal ever, and you just have to hand it to him. Then you're like, fair play. And it's funny, I remember the hand of God, and I had this discussion. We were in a big group at university watching it, and I think none of us thought it was handball at the time. We really couldn't tell. It was only the reaction of the England players that actually made you think that something had happened. But I can completely understand in a way why it was given at the time, because you really couldn't tell. And then you actually have a good final as well. Argentina end up beating West Germany 3-2, but it's one of those games where Argentina 2-0 up, and then Germany make this comeback at the end. And there's all this late drama, and then Maradona, although he's quiet in the game, he sets up the winner. He passes through to Borchega. So, you had a Maradona in his pomp. You had a really good World Cup final. You had the great games along the way, especially with Denmark. I mean, there was also Belgium. Soviet Union was a great game. That was 4-3 to Belgium after extra time against a really good Soviet Union side. You had the classic Scotland-Uruguay, where Scotland only had to beat Uruguay. And Uruguay went down to 10 men after 1 minute. One of their players goes through the back of Strachan, and you think, well, surely the Scots are going to do it now. But it's a very nasty, bitter game. But Uruguay hold on for a 0-0 draw, and so Scotland are eliminated, which is when Alex Ferguson was their manager. And then you had the whole England issue. They were poor in the group, and it was Lineker who really saved them. It's the emergence of Lineker as well, this World Cup. This is where he becomes a world superstar. He scores the hat-trick against Poland. But I remember Wilkins being sent off against Morocco. It was all going on. So for me, that is my favourite World Cup. It hit the sweet spot of, I was at college, I could watch it all. And I really honestly do think, looking back at it in hindsight, when I look at the games, it had some of the most classic games. And as I say, a great final, and Maradona in his complete pomp. So, I would go for an 86 personally as a personal favourite.
I would go 4 years earlier, but chiefly because the 1986 World Cup made me underperform in my O levels. Because I was up to 2:30 in the morning on the day before the examinations were due to take place, and I'd go into the examinations absolutely knackered, and it was I did okay, but I didn't do as well as I should have done. So
there is nothing worse than having exams clash with World Cups. That actually is the one thing about the last World Cup that I liked. I was like, it's quite a good idea actually having winter, because it does have that advantage of you don't have your exams at the time.
That's it. Everyone's winding down for Christmas. It's terrific.
Yeah.
So I know this is a big question, Dom, and it's one that but answer it in your own way. What do you feel is the legacy of the World Cup tournament?
For me, I think the reason I still love the World Cup is, especially now, football is so affected by money. So if you think about the Premiership, it's just less of a competition because money can buy success. And the beauty about the World Cup and the beauty about international football is money can't buy success. You are limited by the players you have. Now, obviously, the richer countries have more money spent on development, etc., so they do get an advantage from that. But still, you have this beautiful thing of golden generations come and go. So if you think about Belgium recently, you think about Denmark, all teams have had it. So it's more of a level playing field still, especially as football gets, as I say, more and more influenced by money. The World Cup still has that beauty about it. I mean, in light of how they're expanding it, there are some pros to that. I mean, I think about the last Euro, and it was nice to see some of the smaller nations, and like Albania, Georgia. It was really great to see them. They liven up competition. So I can see some of the argument for expanding it, but against that, it does dilute the group stages. I feel the jeopardy is kind of going out of it. I mean, we saw in 2022, as I was saying about the Japan group, how fantastic a 4-team group can be, especially when it's the top two to qualify. And I think when you look at the Euros that have just gone, and the way you had the top three, but you didn't know who the top three were going to be, and so some people were playing earlier and some people were playing later and had slight advantage. I don't think that really works. And it does get to the point where it almost feels like too much football. And we forget, I mean, players, yes, they're highly paid, etc., but they're just human beings. And I think, again, in the Euros, we just saw how exhausted some of them looked. And, you know, gone from the end of a long season and you're then being asked to play all of these games. So that's the concerns I have with expanding the World Cup. But it does get the smaller teams in. I do feel some of FIFA's choices are questionable. I mean, Qatar as an example, and then, you know, obviously the next one is US, Canada, and Mexico. So it's going to involve a lot of travel again for players, a lot of games, and a lot of flying for fans as well. I mean, yeah, I understand we're becoming a bigger event. It costs more money to host, so I can see why they do multiple countries. But if you're a fan, I mean, you can't be traveling from Mexico to Canada to US. It's just unfeasible. And, you know, and then you've got Saudi Arabia coming up. But despite all of that, I will always love the World Cup. It's a special occasion. They need to keep it every 4 years. I get freaked out whenever they suggest anything. Talk about 2 years or something like that. It needs to be 4 years. It needs to be special. And I always get sucked in. I was the same, as I said, with 2022. I had my reservations going into it about playing it in winter, about playing it in Qatar and all the issues around Qatar. But once it started, I got sucked in and I enjoyed it as much as every other World Cup. So yeah, it's still a fantastic tournament. I just hope they don't overexpand it. I really do. And I just, as I say, at least it's a more level playing field than, say, the Premiership now. I mean, that's the problem for me, is things like Premiership, where it's just money talks. At least with the World Cup, you know, you get Morocco getting to the semi-final still. So there's still that Cinderella aspect to it, which I find endearing.
Yeah. Well, the book captures the magic of the World Cup. I'll just say that. I mean, we've talked about 5 games, but listeners and viewers, there's another 45 games in there that you can pick from. So there's plenty of scope for you to increase your knowledge or to be nostalgic about what you already know. So, Dominic, have you got any more projects in the pipeline that are up and coming?
I do, actually. I've just literally finished a second book, which I'm going to send to Pitch Publishing at the end of this month. I'm actually doing a final read through. So the World Cup book was kind of a wider audience, a general book. This one's a little bit more specialist. It's kind of a passion project. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it's about one particular league in one particular era. So not Bundesliga, but if you think, like you were saying, Bundesliga in the 70s, it's kind of like that. It's about a specific period in time when a specific league was the best in the world. And as I say, it's more of a passion project. It's something I've always loved. And there actually wasn't a book out there about it. So I felt that was a great opportunity. So yeah, that one's finished. And then I should have a respite. There is obviously a third book already filtering around my head. You can't help yourself. So I'm starting to get an idea, something to do with the Premier League in the late 90s and early 2000s that I'm thinking about. At this stage, it's more about getting a second book over there. But you can't help yourself. You start thinking about a third one. But yeah, as I say, there is a second one that hopefully will go to the publisher at the end of this month for next year.
That's fantastic. It sounds great, mate. I mean, I know exactly how you feel. You're in the middle of writing something, and all you want to do is finish it because you've got the next idea on the bubble. So it's a constant kind of stream of writing and researching. So, but it's great, isn't it? It is great, and the book's fantastic. Where is it available from? For the people who want to pick up a copy of this fantastic book, where can they get it from?
Obviously Amazon. Always have it. So I'm based in the US. It can be got on Amazon US and on Amazon UK. I know from a friend that they saw it in Waterstones. So it's obviously available in Waterstones in the UK and WH Smith. As I say, it's done through Pitch Publishing, and I do need to, again, just give them one more shout out because they did such a fantastic job and they were so good to work with. But yeah, it should be hopefully in any good bookstores and on Amazon.
Dominic, it's a terrific read, which I can thoroughly recommend to anybody with an interest in the World Cup final, even a passing interest in the World Cup final. It's fantastic. And thank you for being a terrific guest, mate. Join us next time on Football Geeks for more informed chat and banter. See you there.
Thank you, Phil.